Awesome. Well, welcome here, guys. As Jim said, my name's Paul. We'll use the term athlete loosely. Compete in a little men's league here on Thursday night, and humility comes in different forms. You know, Father Time just starts ticking, and I didn't have much of a vertical, but it tends to leave. As Jim said, I coach over at Armbruster University. And kind of got my coaching start in AVA with Team Alberta. Rod Durant, I had a chance to play for him and gave me a shot. And I've always been grateful to AVA to kind of gotten my start within the coaching realm, and have loved my experiences that I've had to work with the program. I think my opening joke was already stolen about punch blocking. Somebody had sent me a note on Facebook. They're like, "Are you presenting on punch blocking?" And I'm like, "Shoot skis, I got to really come up with something creative. I've never heard of punch blocking to say." But you are not learning any karate. This isn't a latest Japanese blocking style, karate and blocking combined. But appreciate you guys wanting to learn and grow in the game of coaching. If you have any questions, it's cool that we're a little bit smaller. Feel free to fire away. By no means do I have all the answers, but glad to give you my opinion on the topic. And I hope this session will be able to offer you some insights. I assume everyone's coaching club. Who, men's or women's? Men's. Who's coaching men's? And obviously the rest of the hands are women's, yes. Are you guys mainly 16, 17, 18? Cool. I think it is worth stating, you know, sometimes I've been to clinics before, and, you know, there's someone who's, coaching at a national team level and telling this latest, greatest strategy. And it's like, you know, that's awesome for your athlete because they're jumping 40 inches and touching, 11.8. My guy's touching 10.8. And it's not physically possible for him to execute that, you know. So in this, we're trying to learn and grow as coaches. What is the best technique? I think it's really important for you to evaluate, okay, what is going to be best for the level that I'm at, right? How do I take information, hone it, and try and have, what do I believe is the best technique that is out there? But also what is most applicable to the level that I coach? Because due to varying physical abilities of athletes, what might be best for your group can vary a little bit, right? And I know for myself personally, I am a pretty black and white guy. Like I would love to come in here and sit down and say, okay, what is the top 5 techniques across the board for bunch blocking? Tell me what is the best technique, right? The unique thing is that there can be some variance to how you get something done. You know, I've debated with friends, 2 of the top coaches in the world, in my opinion, Glenn Hogue, Hugh McCutcheon, right? And I don't know them personally, but as I've looked into a little bit, it seems to me, for example, that Hogue is a little bit more drill orientated in his practices, and McCutcheon seems to be fairly gameplay orientated. Well, that's 2 different perspectives of how do you teach skill, but both of them incredibly successful, right? So as a coach, how do we approach, each skill, each aspect, and say, what is the best technique? You do want to be able to have a conviction and say, this is what I believe is the best for my age level. But I think what it can be unique and what can be a challenge, and something I'm realizing in my own coaching experience, that is, it takes a lot of work, is you want to have the best technique, but oftentimes the most successful coaches are the best teachers, right? Own what you believe. Own your convictions of what you think is the best way to do it. But what is going to get you success is, can you teach that? Can you get your team playing that style at a high efficiency, right? You might be saying, we have to split step in passing, right? You might say, we have to lead leg in passing. There's arguments for both sides. Be the best teacher at whatever you have a conviction about as the best way to do it. And if you can get your athletes performing at a high level with the technique that you feel strongly about, I think you're going to be in a great spot. So a little blurb to start things off. So what is bunch blocking? When Lee and I played, sorry Lee, throwing you under the bus, boss.
Way before you.
Lee and I worked together a little bit, so I'm allowed to joke around. But the game used to have blockers kind of out at the aerial, and it was a little bit more, okay, I'm blocking their right side. Where does their right? It was a little bit more one-on-one, man-to-man defense, right? Bunch blocking has changed to be stacking, right? Our outside blockers come into the court more, and it's now a strategy of blocking a zone versus a player. So the strategy of bunch blocking is I'm trying to block a zone more than a player. And again, if you have questions, fire away. So what is the advantage of bunch blocking? You want to know the distribution to the different positions in the level that you play at. I coach in the ACAC, it's a college league, and it can vary, but we would be predominantly outsides getting set the ball, right? I would say it would be around a 70-30 split. From the outsides getting set, left side, right side pipe, to the middles getting set, all right? And why bunch blocking helps with this is because our outside blockers now come into the court and they are trying to help block in the middle. All right, now why is that important? The reason why that's important is that teams would often run what we would call a separation offense. All right, and so what that would mean is I'd run a 30 with a right side. I'm trying to create separation, a longer distance for a middle blocker to travel, right? Or a 61 left side. And so in the old days, right, that middle would have to front the opposition's middle. And so now he's blocking that 60, and if we run the left side, that's a long distance for your middle to close. Chances are they're going to get a one-on-one. So what bunch blocking has done is it's brought outsides in, and now we're trying to both help on middle routes. And the key to that is our middle can remain neutral or in the center of the court, making it easier to block to the left side and to the right side, right? So again, you want to know, that could vary. You might be at 16U women's ball and they're running 50% of the offense in the middle, right? This strategy can still help you, but you want to know what your distributions are, right? So for us in our strategy, we try and get slowdowns against the middle to get solid blocks on the outside, right? But the main advantage is that we can keep our middle neutral and it's easier for them to close. And with bringing our outside blockers into the court, we can now get double blocks much more consistently, right? So we can get two people on the middle, and we should be in a better chance to get two people on the outside, which is a great advantage. And we can triple block more, right? If you guys implement that in, we can triple more, which is good. Another advantage is that because blockers are inside the court more, they can swing block. Swing blocking helps you to touch higher. It's debated whether that's better as a blocker, right? But the blockers will touch higher because they're able to swing block. So what is a disadvantage of swing blocking or bunch blocking? Blockers often get tooled more, right? Because within swing blocking, if you're not doing the technique properly, the blocker is not going to be pressed at contact, or they're reaching, and the attacker can tool them, right? So that is a different factor. Obviously, you want to train your blockers to have good technique, but that would be the main disadvantage. To be great at blocking, we need two aspects, right? We need to have fantastic technique, and we also need to have great decision making. We need both, right? You can have the best technique blocking team in the world, and if your athletes can't read where that setter's setting the ball, it's going to do us no good, right? And if you can have the best reading team in the world, but your technique's brutal, we're out to lunch, right? Question for you. Which would you say is harder to teach? Ask yourself that question in your mind. Is technique harder to teach, or is reading harder to teach? Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I think that just to expand on that, like there's some setters who are just unbelievable at disguising what run they're going to use, whereas there's others where it's a little bit easier to read. So I think that kind of helps. But again, if you're faced off against a really good setter as a middle blocker who might just be learning this new skill, it might just be a much tougher task.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And also as a coach, right, we're coaches, I think it's harder to teach because it's hard to get inside someone's brain, right? How do I get inside of your cranium and figure out what you're thinking at that point of decision making? I'm dependent upon your feedback, and your feedback could be different than your feedback. You could actually tell me, off things, right? So the technique is a little bit easier for me in this presentation to give you practical information. We need both. Right? And reading is very important, but due to the fact that it's in the brain, I think it's a little bit harder to teach. Excuse me. Last point before we get into the actual meat and potatoes of it. I think you might be hearing some things that are different today for you. I think it's great for athletes to learn how to learn, right? If you're teaching them something new and they have to pick up and change and do a skill differently, that is a great tool for an athlete. One of the best athletes I've ever coached in my life was consistently called undersized at every level. And he overcame and represented Canada and still playing because he could learn. He could continually learn. That was a gift that he had. But you might be learning some new things this weekend. I think it's great for athletes, especially at a developmental level, to have to learn how to learn, right? To be doing some skills in different ways. So let's start getting into some practicalities of technique in bunch blocking. First of all, starting points. Fired up, I got to get trucking here. Starting points. We have, most of you guys have a circle in your gym, right? I'm pretty anal with my guys about, I expect you to be in the exact starting point every single time. But then, you are in charge of reading the play and reacting. Be in a spot that I think's best, but then you be a student and flow from there. Our left sides, we straddle the circle. Our middles start neutral, and our right side, our position 2 blockers, they start with their left foot on the circle. Within our game, the tempo of the offense is pretty fast, and a 31 left side set is difficult to block. And so what we actually do is we start staggered. So if I'm on the right side, my outside would start with his right foot back, so it's easier for him to turn his hips and get out and swing block just on the right side, because of that set looks very similar, and the decision time is very quick. That they need time to be able, or they need help to get out there quick. One other thing that I heard Glenn Hogue say once I thought was very smart is when we're talking about bunch blocking, but I think that when you talk defensively, you need to talk all 6 athletes. You need to talk blockers and diggers together. It's not separate, it's together. How do we work together to block, to dig, to stop the opposition, right? And so when you're setting up your defenses, do your best to eliminate redundancy, right? If you're sealing the line, why would you dig a digger down the line? Where 2 guys are taking the same spot, right? So within our defense, we have 5 and 1, meter and a half, 1.5 meters off behind the attack line, a meter in. And our 6-back would get a signal from the middle against the middle of, are they blocking 5 or 1? And we slide into the seam on a 61. Our 6-back slides into that seam on a 31. Our 6-back slides into that seam. So some starting points, I think, are very important. Again, the advantage to bunch blocking is that your middle stays neutral. We allow our middles to shade, right? If they think, oh, that could be going to a 30, I let them shade to that side, but they're not allowed to front because that eliminates the value of bunch blocking, right? You want your middle to be able to close to the outside because we're saying that most of the time the ball is going to the outside, right? So, what are footworks that you would use within bunch blocking? Again, how do you give your athletes tools? What's proper technique to be able to accomplish this skill? For 4 different footworks we have our guys work on. First one is a shuffle step, right? So I'm just shuffling over. We want to end as blockers, obviously pressing to the baseline. When you have to open up your hips, that takes time, right? Because that's going to open up my shoulders and then I got to come back. So on short movements, we teach a shuffle step. What would be examples of that? Our outsides, a left side could shuffle towards a 60, right? A left side, if a pass gets passed a little bit more to 3, 3.5, and our blockers are adjusting, they could shuffle over. They shuffle in to block a pipe set, right? Shuffle step, that would be scenarios an outside blocker would use it. Middle, they might use a shuffle step just to get in a shade spot, right? I'm shading towards a 60, I'm going to shuffle quick and go up. Have to be stopped when the setter's setting the ball or you're going to be late reacting, right? I see that. I was talking with our guys about that last week. You have to be stopped when the setter has the ball, when you're in your movement. Second footwork that you would use, and this is the main footwork for an outside blocker, would just be simply crossover and up. Again, you need to ask yourself, what is the physical capabilities of my athlete in my level? Most of my guys are athletic enough that they can cross over and up and cover the distance to get it to the outside and block line if they need to block line, right? You would also see if a middle might use it if they're late or really big, but predominantly crossover and up is something that I would have my outside blockers using. Next footwork is step crossover up. Middles are hopefully going to use this, and for you guys in development, I think that this footwork is so key within your middle blockers. Most middle blockers do not take a great first step. It's not big enough, and they often will leave a tiny bit of seam. And to me, it correlates back to the first step. So, step, crossover, up, right? It would be your main footwork. If your outside isn't as big, your outside blocker could use that footwork as well, right? And then lastly, our fourth footwork combines the first and third. We have a shuffle into a step crossover up, and that's used for triple blocking. So when we want to triple, our third guy, that's his footwork, where he would be shuffle, step, crossover, up. Is that applause sign working? Like, that was pretty good footwork there, maybe. Just joking. So 4 different footworks. And can you train your athletes, give them tools to be able to react in the different situation that each footwork might be used in? Now, I went through a lot there. Anybody have any questions about that? Cool. Oh, my bad.
Just the signaling with the middle,
Pardon me?
just the signaling in the middle, just 1, 2, as far as which direction they're going to go?
Great question. So on a 50 route or a 41 route, our guys give the signal 5 or 1. And that means the middle is blocking to 5, and our 6-back digger would shade to 1 then. So that, again, we're not having redundancy, right? And I have some slides that we'll show a little bit later. Also, I should have said, I tell my 6-back digger halfway between attack line and end line. You want to be halfway, and then what side are you on, right? We dig our digger into the seam because, let me explain it a little bit more, if there's a 30 route, a 31 route, it is both the middle and right side blocker on our team's responsibility to block that ball. But again, when I communicate to my guys is I want slowdowns in the middle, blocks on the outside. So they don't have to commit in that. Like I'm not expecting a full commit. I'm expecting a reaction and trying to slow the ball down. And they both would be going into that area. But the reality is decision making, they're not always going to make that decision. And so that's why I also slide my digger into that zone. If you want to get really complicated, and I haven't come up with convictions on my own yet of what I would want to do, but if you can get a team to make great decisions all the time, I've thought at times of saying, okay, I want my right side blocker in a 31 to press, and the middle would reach to slow that ball down. Right now, due to decisions, my guys are both just trying to get hands in that area and slow it down, right? But you could develop more strategy of what do you want to do in those help block situations against the middle where your left side or right side blocker are helping out. Yeah, there's another question.
I don't know what you talk about when you say front and shade.
Okay, no, excellent. Great question. Because lots of times we just use different terminology, right? Like people call left side sets 18 different things, right? Excellent. So if Josh is playing middle and he's running a 61, right? Let's just simulate. And I'm starting neutral. This would be neutral for me. To front him would mean my middle is going to get right in front of him to block him, right? But what that does is that eliminates my chance to close to the outside. So I tell my guys that they can shade, which means get a little closer to him because they think it's going to go 60, but I don't want them fronting because we don't know for sure. I do want my athletes to be students, so they have that option if they think it's going in that direction. Now, that if you have a game plan scenario, that's totally different. Like we'll have sometimes we'll make an adjustment or we'll have a game plan that we're going with this middle, and we would then front him because we think that is the guy who is going to get set. So there's front and shade. Great question. Good.
So just going back to the original.
Yeah.
How late are you having 6 move, or how early are you having them go to that?
They're supposed to be we call our middle defense, we call IDP, initial defensive position. I'm sure people have heard that. And right away, they have to get there ASAP. They need to know the signal beforehand. And then they got to use their eyes. If the middle runs a route different than 50-40, or 60 or 30, they know where they have to be. So they need to get there quick. Yeah. 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 When we're in defense. And in transition, right? That they're training their eyes to see what's happening and then getting to that for IDP, and then if it goes outside, react from there. Yeah. Cool. A couple other things. Arm swings. We talked about how bunch blocking, you're swing blocking, you get a little bit higher, right? I want to maximize that capability, and so our outsides, we teach a full arm swing, right? To maximize their jump and get high. But at times, our middles, when they're trying to swing block, can hit the person that they're closing to. So we actually teach elbows bent when we swing block in the middle, where our guy would close and he's just swing blocking like this and pressing, because the swing gets you higher, but we don't want to run into that guy, right? So we teach 2 different types of arm swings. we mentioned that the one disadvantage, and maybe there are others that I didn't come up with, within bunch blocking, is you can drift on a swing block. The purpose of swing blocking is to get big, right? And as I swing block, I'm never going to be able to fully get perpendicular back to the net. That's impossible in my mind, right? You're taking away your momentum you're creating with swing blocking if you get that foot all the way around. So your feet are going to be turned. But to train your athletes, a lot of athletes, when they come out and swing block, their feet are so far to the side wall, right, that they have to turn so much in the air, and that creates an opportunity to get tooled. So you're trying to find a happy medium in your coaching, right? Their footwork is not going to get all the way around, but you want to work to get it more at a 45-degree angle instead of an 80 or even 90-degree angle, which can happen a lot of times with athletes, right? And, I mean, I like swing blocking. There's times, I heard Hogue say one time that blocking is becoming less and less of a point-scoring skill. We still score some points with it at our level. But in all honesty, there's times where it's more about me not losing points than gaining points within blocking. Where we get tooled too many times, we're actually giving up more points than we're gaining, right? But that doesn't mean that blocking isn't hugely important, right? You're hoping to get the actual point in a after the dig, we transition and we want to attack it, right? Blocking's hugely important. It may at your level still gain you a lot of points, but it's hugely valuable within your defensive setup, obviously. Excuse me. Big within pressing, right? Obviously trying to get your hands over the net as quick as you can, press to the baseline as quick as you can as a blocker. We talk about in our bunch blocking that for the middle blockers, if they're closing and they are a shoulder width or less to the outside blocker, all right, that we press. We press. Because how many times have you seen a blocker go up and it ends on your side, right? Goes down their block and it's on your side because we're not pressed, right? Happens all the time. So I often find within our middles, right, that they can get the tendency, I want to close it, and then we don't have pressing to take away a cross shot. So shoulder width or less to the outside, we still press. If we're greater than a shoulder width, we reach, turn our hands up and try and slow block or soft block. Okay? So that might be a strategy you want to develop within what your athletes are allowed to do, I guess, so to say. This is very, very, you guys are, in a lot of ways, the most important coaches to our country's success at the international level. I'm blessed. I love what I do. I get guys 18 to 22. And it is hard to break habits. It is so hard. I've been coaching a guy for 3 years. And we've been talking about hitting that serve with his hand on a spin serve for 3 years. And he's still struggling. Bless his heart, right? The point is, it can be hard to change habits. If you can be giving great fundamental feedback so that your athletes are learning solid technique, that can go so far into their future success. I bring that up because this next area I find is really important, and I don't see it happening all that time successfully. And that is, what are we doing with our eyes as a blocker? We teach our guys, first thing that they're trying to pick up, obviously the pass, right? Where does the pass go? Let's see it. That's going to give me information. If I'm a middle blocker and that ball's past the attack line, 99% of the time it's going outside. There's not many people in our league, and I think we have some excellent athletes in our league. But it's seldom getting forced, right? That gives you information. Second, we need to take a quick peek and see where is bunch blocking. We are blocking zones, right? But where is that man who's mainly in my zone going? Is there a different route, right? Thirdly, we got to pick up the setter. Where are they making that set? And then fourthly, our eyes got to get back to the hitter, because he's going to tell, he or she are going to tell me where that ball is going to go. But we typically see ball watching, right? I'm just watching the ball. And we're missing out on so much valuable information. We've talked with my team, I've been trying to talk about this for the last year, of just what are my eyes picking up? There's so much valuable information. And I think a lot of times we miss out on that information because we're just watching the ball, right? The hitter is going to tell us, the setter is going to tell us things with what their body does of what they're going to do with that ball. And so I think trying to train your athletes in what do they do with their eyes. Peripheral vision, I think it's a skill. At times I'm, if you have any tips of how to increase teaching peripheral vision, I would be all ears. Something I'm like trying to get working with my guys. You'll see, a rally's going on and a position 1 C-ball hitter digs the ball in front of the attack line, and my left side blocker is still ready to block the C-ball. Broski, he ain't that quick. He's not getting back and getting an approach, right? Or you'll see scenarios, like a lot of teams play curl under defense, where a left side will come flying in, curl under, pick up a tip in position 2, and they're not getting an approach. And our right side blocker is out here just ready to swing block. No, our eyes need to pick up. And sometimes it's really just pointing out those cues, right, of being able to pick up information quick that I see. Boom, do I know what each person in each position looks like? We're all smart athletes. Take a few minutes or take 30 seconds before the game and look at each athlete, right? Who's playing where? Anyways, training our athletes to have peripheral vision. Obviously, it's a little bit harder for the blockers to see the whole court, but so helpful, especially for a middle blocker, if they can be in a habit of seeing the ball in my peripheral, but picking up valuable information of where people are going on their routes. Awesome. So that is some of what I would consider good technical teaching points to train your athletes in their footwork, in their arm swing, in their pressing, in their eyes, of how do I go about blocking. I just want to show really quick, we talked briefly about the concept of how do we work together, blockers and diggers. And some of this will play into a later point of what we might want to do within strategy. So, fired up, it's coming up. So this is what we do for defensive positioning in the game, all right? Come on, I've never used one of these guys before. This is oh my goodness, I feel important. I've never done this before. Lee, fire it up, it's a whole new world. So, I should have had this right away. This is what we're talking about. Our outside, it used to be that the outside was out there. Now they're slid in, right? It used to be the left side blocker was out here. They're slid in, and our middle is trying to stay neutral, right? I find, and again, what's your level? The plant ball from the middle, it's the hardest one to dig, right? And so, and I find that balls are actually going a little bit deeper from opposing middles. So we slide back 1.5 meters. As I said, our 6 back is halfway from end line to attack line, and then they have to be on the opposite side on the 50 or 40. They would slide over here on the 61, over here on the 31, right? We talk about setter dump is the blocker's responsibility in front of the attack line. Behind the attack line, it's the digger's responsibility. Pretty simple. What would we do against the right side? I talk to my guys about I want my line digger 3/4 depth. Okay? So this guy in 5 here, he's supposed to be 3/4 depth from end line to center line. And then 6 back, you're going to read a bunch, but we're sliding cross court. Lots of teams would run curl under, where this digger curls under, obviously. Same thing, defense on the left side. When we operate in our pipe defense, I want my guys 3/5 distance down the line. And this here, though, how fast the pipes run in our league, we talk about that in our training camp week, and then when we get on the court, we talk about you're never going to get to the sideline. You're just trying to get backed up. Our diggers are actually in the court. I mean, it'd be ideally if they got outside, but it's just so fast that they can't quite get there. And then we also have triple blocking, where we bring our line digger up the line and into the court to be able to cover tips. And 6 back is deep end line. 6 back is often reading, right? Obviously, this is about blocking. And so, you know, what you do with your diggers, I hope that this is an example of, hey, why would we dig him down the line when we're trying to block the line, right? We tell our outside blocker that they can never get beat down the line when we're in triple block defense, so that we can bring this guy up in for tips to free up these guys to cover a little bit more court, right? So, within, this is something that Glenn Hogue had. So, now how do we talk about some different strategies within bunch blocking? All right? If you have an opportunity to game plan, it's often pretty hard and difficult for you guys. You'd be playing, 6, 7 games in a weekend? Obviously, it's hard to have a game plan against every team you play, but developing some base defensive strategies, right? Where again, we're trying to eliminate redundancy between a blocker's taking a certain area in the court and a digger's taking a certain area in the court. You'll notice a little bit better picture, right? There's situations when you're blocking cross. Notice how their 6 back digger is down the line more, right? We do this often when we're trying to block a C ball, where we'll block cross court more because I want my front row left side helping in the middle, helping on the setter, and it's a little bit easier for them to not have to go as far in blocking a C ball. So we have them blocking cross court a little bit more, right? And where we would dig our 6 back digger down the line, right? But that is a strategy that you could slide in. If I'm going to block a little bit more cross court, I might bring my 6 digger down the line, right? You might be in another scenario where you're like, I really want to block line. This attacker, that seems to be their best shot. So we're gonna seal the line, and then you have an option where you could bring that line digger up for tips and dig 3 cross court, right? Or You could even adjust them into the court even more, right? But the concept of how do we work with our all 6 players and have some adjustments so that we're covering not the same spot. Another strategy you might want to use within your bunch blocking is that there are scenarios where you might see, hey, this team has 3 hitters front row, and the right side I just don't think is that good, right? And where you might be ranking the opposition's attackers, right? Something that you could do is if you feel like the right side hitter is weak, that you could make an adjustment and say, we're going to block in something that we would call a 12. All right? The reason why I call it a 12 is if I'm one of these 3 blockers, if you visualize with me, diggers, I'm one of these 3 diggers, and I'm facing the net, it looks like 1 blocker and 2 blockers, in a sense, right? We're shading over. But you're making an adjustment strategically to say, I want to stop that left side. And I'm going to make it easy for my front row middle to get out there. Now you could do several things within that, right? we use it a few different ways. We often use it when they're setter's front row and they have a C-ball hitter in 1. In our league, guys don't hit the C-ball with the highest level of efficiency, right? So we often would run a 12 defense where our left side, this guy right here, right, he's coming in and he's got the setter dump. He's got the 60. He's got the C-ball. He's got the 50. Now, we could be in 2 different scenarios where we could say, this middle, you're gone. You're gone. If they run a 30 route, you front the 30 because it's allowing us to get to the outside. You take the 30, and then you just be in a shuffle step to the left side, and you should be able to get out there. But we're saying we're going to get 2 blockers out here on the left side, right? Or you could say, okay, we're in this scenario. Now, our middle, you're allowed to make a decision. Do you go back and help on the 50, or are you going out to the left side? But you can create some strategies. You could do it the opposite way too, where we call it a 21, right? Where the blocker on the right side, they have the left side, the 31, and then our middle is sliding over with our left side more, and they're emphasizing on the right side. So there's strategical things you could try and do depending on what you see on the opposite side of the net and how good you think those players are. Obviously, it helps when there's 2 hitters that you think you can eliminate, right? We run this scenario also when we don't think there's a pipe option that is going to be that much of a threat as well, right? Because if there's 3 options still for the blockers, they got to make decisions, right? So there's some strategies that you can put forth within your defense.
Is that something you're, as a coach, talking about, or you're letting players decide?
You know, I think if you create an environment where the athletes are processing, discussing information, that's a great thing. I say to my guys, on a game plan decision like that, I want you to come talk to me, and that we agree on it, right? So I call in 12 or 21. I might have to come up with a different name now. No, I'm sure you guys won't tell anybody else. They can't even hear it the other side half the time anyways. So
if the players are making that decision, they make sure they communicate with the back row as well?
Yeah.
If that's what they're doing, or is the back row just see?
Yeah. No, they want, 100% they want to be communicating. Like we had a scenario where we wanted to run a 12 defense in a rotation against the team that we were playing. And we felt like they would run some 30s. And so we said, hey, you're going to front the 30 when it comes by, and we dug our 6 back digger then to position 5, not down the line where we regularly are in our base defense, because we were fronting the 30, taking the line shot. So the reason why I mention that is it is important for the defense to know. So again, the same concept of not having redundancy between the two different people. We talk, when we're blocking, we talk so that there's hopefully clarity in ball widths. All right? So if we're blocking a C ball, 3 balls, that means the outside hitter, 3 actual volleyballs, and then their left hand would be on the outside of where that ball would end. Right? So that hopefully there's something visual that people can measure in a sense, right? And that we have consistency between us. There also can be times our speed of our offense is pretty fast, and so it's hard for us to do this, but there might be scenarios where you might talk to your athletes and say, hey, let's be in a half commit, right? Or a toe jump or a half jump, whatever you want to call it. Let's be half jumping on every 3 pass against that middle when they're running a 51. Because it seems like they're going to them in that 3-pass route a decent amount of times, right? But it might give your athlete time to go and then still get outside. Again, that's all dependent on how fast the offense is, and the game is getting faster and faster and faster. That something like that is difficult to try and accomplish, right? But that could be something that is a strategy that you try and implement. You can be even more creative. I remember one team that I coached that we drew up a defense where if we felt like the opposition middle, that we had a little bit more indecision on where teams might go, that our middle would be in a full commit on their middle, right? Our outside blocker would seal the line, and we would actually dig 4 diggers cross court. And the middle, who just committed, would slide in for tips on the outside. There's different strategies that you can create for your team. So that's a little bit of the technical aspect. The whole other category that's just as equally important is decision making. And that's a little bit harder to teach. I think having athletes, there's a video on YouTube by Karch Karai about decision making that I think is excellent. And he calls it about picking up cues. He calls it Henki. Never heard of the word before, but where you're trying to teach your athletes to learn to pick up cues, right? And because that's really what you're doing. The more you play the game, right, you may not think it out loud, but you see a setter arches back and you know that I'm going to go to the right side, right? You just pick up cues that determine different actions. So the more that your athletes can watch video and be watching players do things, they're going to see and hopefully create better decision making. But I need to learn more about the decision making process and how to teach that. Again, that's one resource, Karch Karai online. But that is an important aspect. You're also trying to train decision making for your athletes. That's why I think the eyes is so big, because the more information they see, the better decisions they probably will make. A couple drills that I think can be helpful. There's a drill online if you want a visual from Team Canada. We do something similar to it, where we got 3 blockers on our side. It's broken down in this sense. You can have targets or you can have people on a box, and we're setting left side pipe or right side, and our blockers are trying to react, right? We run that drill also with our liberos. So our liberos are getting out of system setting when we're trying to train our triple block scenario, right? Where liberos are set into the outside or to the pipe, and our people are trying to triple that. I think another really good drill, is where you have simply your one outside blocker. So for example, left side. And they have to block the pipe, the 50, the setter dump, and the C-ball, right? But because that's really what they have to do in a game. They're blocking that zone, and all those options are in their zone, right? Same with the right side, where they would have to block a pipe, a 31, or a left side, and it's just the right side against those three attackers, and they're trying to train what would be game-like for them. And then obviously, you can just get into wash scenarios. We have an out-of-system wash drill where we attack the ball at our setter, and then our libero's got second contact, and we're working on our triple block scenario out of that. There's other defensive wash drills that we do of where we'll just send any number, 5 to 10 free balls to one side, and we're blocking, right? We do a defensive drill, 17 to 8, where the defensive side serves every single time, and they're at 17 points. They're trying to get to 25. Offense is at 8. They're trying to get to 25, right? But it allows you to put a little bit more focus, and you can modify. You can create drills however you want, right? Where you got to get 2 stops in a row, for example, right? But obviously, wash, being game-like, is going to help train the decision-making. I think broken down is good to have in, so you're hopefully teaching technique that they're making a habit, and then the decision-making can play itself out in wash. Another thing that I think can be helpful is we have a rope that we use in our practice gym that we put an extra antenna in the middle of the court, tie the rope around, tie it to the outside of the antenna, and it's a visual for athletes to get their hands underneath, trying to work on their blocking. I know time is almost up here. Any questions? Probably is up. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
So I'm just wondering more or less your opinion where I'm just looking to see what do you think is the best way to sort of get your middles to close to the outsides if they're swing blocking, just because I seem to have this issue where my outsides, they try to go for a big momentum point or something like that, whether it be in practice or in a game, and they're just very aggressive swing blocking, and then there ends up being a seam being left just because they were a little bit too over aggressive. So would you just say that just kind of goes back to making sure that the footwork stays consistent by the outsides every single time, and you're just making sure that corresponds with the defense as well? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I would suggest that seeing what the first step is from the middle, right? If it's the seam between the middle and the outside, and you feel like the middle isn't closing it, I think most of the time it can correlate back to their first step isn't big enough. And it does take reps to be in sync, right? I think part of what you're saying is that your outside gets big and they're drifting away from your middle, right? And so there's going to be drift, right? I don't think it's feasible for us to say, don't drift, athletes. There's going to be drift, but hopefully there's drift from both athletes, right? in that their footwork isn't going to be perpendicular, it's going to be a little bit to the side. But it could be a jumping variance too, right? So, yeah, there are a few different things you could look at. Yeah.
Along the same lines, get the problem where the middle gets too close, and then say they end up hitting each other.
Yeah. No, great point. We find at times in our triple block scenario that our outside will run into the middle. And so we've talked to them at times where that first shuffle step actually goes back because they need to get going as well within the speed, but because if they wait for him to fully clear out, they're going to be late. So we'd go behind and then back in a triple block scenario. But that, I would say, is a decision making, right? Your outside isn't making the decision quick enough that your middle is. And so just continuing to try and train the mind or the eyes could help out with that. Yeah. Cool. Just in closing, I just wanted to encourage you guys and / kind of challenge us as coaches with the question of what is truly going to satisfy us as coaches. And everyone's in coaching because we're competitive, right? And I think that's awesome. I think that's great. I have been very blessed in my life to see how sport can also teach character, how teams can become a family, right? And lifelong friendships can be made. And us as leaders, us as coaches, can impact lives. And really it's both. How do we win at both? How do we win at, and this is me talking, I hope I'm not stepping on AVA toes, but I just think it's a great opportunity in the sense that our world needs leaders to impact the next generation. I just had a kid, and I was kind of surprised, but him and his fiance asked me to marry them. And I was like, that's kind of cool, right? We won a championship together, and that championship was rewarding. But in all honesty, that championship has faded. It has not brought me satisfaction, very minimal satisfaction in the last 10 years. Nobody even knows that I've won that championship for the most part, right? But the character and the relationships that were built through sport can last a lifetime, can be valuable for the athletes we work with for the rest of their lives. That they learn selflessness. We all know that when you get in the real world, it is easy to face selfishness all over the place, right? What a great gift, selflessness, team first. People can learn that within the game. And I say this to myself. I feel like I haven't done as good a job in this year with my team of building character, building the relationship and connection piece. But I just encourage all of us. Influence is what an amazing thing for you to be able to hear in 10 years. Hey, yeah, we won a championship. And again, I'm not saying we don't want to win. All of us want to win, obviously, right? But I think we have a great opportunity to impact young lives and make a difference. And that's not pressure. I'm not trying to say that like, oh, you're a failure if you don't do that, right? 100%. Don't hear me say that. Don't hear me say it. But I just think that's such an awesome opportunity we have. And so encourage you within your teams that you get to work with. Hope it's a great time this year and into the years in the future that you coach. And may it be a lifelong, fulfilling experience for you as a coach.